The early autumn sun streamed through the windows of Oak Ridge Elementary School, casting long rectangles of light across the polished hallway floor. It was just after lunch on a Tuesday, and the building hummed with the distant sounds of learning, the murmur of reading groups, the occasional laugh, and teachers' voices rising and falling like gentle waves. In his office, Principal Robert Warren rubbed his temples. 23 years in education had given him a sixth sense about students. He could spot a made-up excuse from a mile away. The creative stories, the elaborate explanations for missing homework, the tearful claims of innocence when caught red-handed. He'd heard them all. Over time, a protective layer of skepticism had formed around his once trusting heart. His intercom buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. "Mr. Warren?" It was Ms. Patel from the front office. "Mrs. Lopez from room 12 just called. She says one of her students hasn't returned from the bathroom." "Been gone almost 15 minutes, Principal Warren sighed. "Name? Jamie Martinez. He jotted the name on his notepad. I'll find him." "Thank you, Ms. Patel." Standing up, Principal Warren straightened his tie and headed out. This was the part of his job he disliked most, tracking down wandering students. In his experience, a child gone that long was rarely lost. They were usually somewhere they shouldn't be. The main hallways were empty as classes were in session. He checked the boys' bathroom near room 12 first. No Jamie. Next, he walked past the cafeteria, glancing in. Still no sign of the missing student. As he rounded the corner toward the gym, he spotted a small figure outside the art room, fiddling with something by the door. There he was, Jamie Martinez, a small boy with dark hair falling across his forehead, completely focused on whatever he was doing with the art room door. The boy didn't notice Principal Warren approaching until his shadow fell across the floor. Jamie looked up, startled. His eyes widened at the sight of the principal, and he quickly stepped back from the door. "Good afternoon, Jamie," Principal Warren said, his voice calm but firm. "Care to explain why you're not in Mrs. Lopez's class right now?" The boy's hands twisted the bottom of his too large blue t-shirt. He was small for a fifth grader, with a thin face and eyes that seemed too serious for a child his age. "I was putting these back for Ms. Winters," Jamie said quietly, holding up a ring of keys. Principal Warren raised an eyebrow. In his experience, students with keys usually meant mischief. "And why do you have the art teacher's keys?" "She asked me to get more colored paper from the supply closet," Jamie explained, his voice gaining a little confidence. "She's helping my class with our special projects today, but she couldn't leave the other students with the scissors and paint. So she asked if I could get the paper, but the closet was locked, so she gave me her keys." It was a detailed explanation, too detailed in Principal Warren's mind. The most elaborate lies often came with unnecessary specifics, something he'd learned from years of student excuses. "I see," he said, not bothering to hide his doubt. "And it took you 15 minutes to get paper from a closet?" Jamie's shoulders slumped slightly. "No, sir. I got the paper first. Ms. Winters already has it. But then she asked if I could lock the supply closet on my way back, and—" He hesitated. "I was having trouble with the key. It got stuck and I didn't want to break it." Principal Warren studied the boy. Jamie didn't fidget under his gaze like most students caught in a lie. Instead, he stood still, his dark eyes meeting the principal's without wavering. It was unusual, but then again, some of the best fibbers were the ones who could maintain eye contact. "Your teacher called the office because you've been gone too long," Principal Warren said. "Mrs. Lopez is worried about you." A flash of concern crossed Jamie's face. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make anyone worry." The story sounded rehearsed to Principal Warren's experienced ear. A student with permission to be out of class wouldn't take 15 minutes without a good reason. And art supplies weren't exactly a priority. More likely, Jamie had been wandering the halls, avoiding classwork. "Let me see what you were doing with that door," Principal Warren said, stepping closer to inspect the art room entrance. Jamie stepped aside. "I was just locking it. Ms. Winters said to make sure it clicked." Principal Warren tried the door handle. It was indeed locked, but that didn't prove anything. The boy could have been trying to get in, not lock up after himself. "Why would Ms. Winters need more paper in the middle of class?" Principal Warren asked, finding another hole in the story. Jamie's eyes lit up slightly. "Because Tommy spilled water all over the first batch. It was an accident, but all the paper got soaked, and we need it for our family heritage projects." The answer came too quickly, too smoothly. Principal Warren had seen this pattern countless times. One question answered led to another elaborate explanation, building a house of cards that eventually tumbled down under scrutiny. "Jamie," he said, his voice taking on the special tone he reserved for getting to the truth. "I've been a principal for a long time. I appreciate creativity, but I value honesty more. If you're having trouble in class and needed a break, that's something we can talk about. But making up stories only makes things worse." Jamie's face fell. "But I'm not." Principal Warren held up a hand. "Let's go see Ms. Winters together, shall we?" "I think that's the quickest way to sort this out." A flash of relief crossed Jamie's face. Not the reaction Principal Warren expected. Usually when he suggested verifying a student's story, he saw panic, not relief. "Yes, sir," Jamie said, handing over the keys without hesitation. Principal Warren pocketed the keys and gestured for Jamie to walk ahead of him. As they headed toward Mrs. Lopez's classroom, where Ms. Winters was supposedly helping with an art project, Principal Warren observed the boy. Jamie walked with his head up, not dragging his feet or trying to delay their arrival like students usually did when their lies were about to be exposed. It was unusual enough that a tiny seed of doubt began to form in Principal Warren's mind. Could the boy be telling the truth? He quickly dismissed the thought. 23 years of experience had taught him to trust his instincts. And his instincts said this was another case of a student where they shouldn't be. They passed several classroom doors, the sound of learning drifting into the hallway. Jamie kept pace beside him, occasionally glancing up as if wanting to say something but thinking better of it. "Is there something else you want to tell me before we get to your classroom?" Principal Warren asked, giving the boy one last chance to come clean. Jamie shook his head. "No, sir, but..." He hesitated. "Ms. Winters might be worried about her keys." Principal Warren nodded, non-committal. At least the boy was sticking to his story. Consistent, if nothing else. As they approached room 12, Principal Warren could hear the happy chaos of an art project in progress. Chairs scraping, children chatting, and the occasional instruction rising above the din. He opened the door and 30 pairs of eyes turned toward them. Mrs. Lopez, a veteran teacher with silver-streaked hair, was helping a student at one desk, while Miss Winters, the younger art teacher, supervised a small group in the corner. The room smelled of glue and construction paper, and colorful projects lined the walls. "Mr. Warren," Mrs. Lopez said, straightening up with surprise. "You found him." Before Principal Warren could respond, Ms. Winters looked up from her group and spotted Jamie. "Jamie, did you have trouble with the lock?" she called out, then noticed Principal Warren standing beside him. "Oh, hello, Mr. Warren. Is everything okay?" Principal Warren felt the first real flicker of uncertainty. Ms. Winters didn't look surprised to see Jamie at all. In fact, she looked like she'd been expecting him. "Ms. Winters, did you send Jamie to get supplies?" he asked directly, still holding on to his skepticism. "Yes, of course," she replied, looking confused at the question. "We had a little accident with our first batch of paper." She gestured to a garbage can where soggy, colorful sheets were visible. "Jamie was kind enough to get us more from the supply closet." "Did something happen?" Principal Warren felt something shift inside him. He glanced down at Jamie, who wasn't looking smug or victorious as students often did when their unlikely stories were confirmed. Instead, the boy just looked relieved to be back in class. "Jamie was gone for quite a while," Principal Warren said, his voice softer now. Mrs. Lopez was concerned. "Oh." Ms. Winters put her hand to her mouth. "That's my fault. The supply closet lock has been sticking and I forgot to warn him. I'm sorry for the confusion." Mrs. Lopez nodded. "No harm done. Come on back to your seat, Jamie. We're working on our family trees." Jamie looked up at Principal Warren, waiting to be dismissed. For the first time, Principal Warren really looked at the boy, not as a potential troublemaker, but as a student who had been telling the truth all along. Jamie's worn but clean clothes, his serious eyes, the way he stood patiently waiting rather than rushing back to his friends, all of it painted a different picture than the one Principal Warren had initially drawn in his mind. "Here are Ms. Winters' keys," Principal Warren said, handing them to Jamie. "Please return them to her." "Yes, sir," Jamie replied, taking the keys carefully. As Jamie walked over to Ms. Winters, Principal Warren watched him go, a strange feeling settling in his chest. Had his years of catching students in lies made him too quick to disbelieve, too ready to see deception where there might be only truth? Mrs. Lopez approached him at the door. "Everything okay, Robert?" He nodded slowly. Yes, just a misunderstanding. His eyes followed Jamie, who had rejoined his group and was already focused on his project, the brief hallway drama apparently forgotten. He's a good kid, Mrs. Lopez said quietly, following his gaze. Quiet, but always helpful. Principal Warren nodded again, the seed of doubt that had planted itself earlier now growing into something more substantial. A reminder that sometimes, just sometimes, the simplest explanation was the truth. I'll let you get back to your class, he said, stepping back into the hallway, his mind already turning over this small but significant moment, a moment that would soon lead to much more than either he or Jamie could possibly imagine. Principal Warren returned to his office with an unsettled feeling in his chest. The interaction with Jamie Martinez kept replaying in his mind like a movie he couldn't turn off. He sat at his desk, absently shuffling papers while his thoughts wandered back to the boy's serious eyes and straightforward answers. What bothered him most wasn't that Jamie had been telling the truth. It was how quickly he, Principal Warren, had jumped to the opposite conclusion. Had he become so jaded by years of catching students in lies that he'd lost the ability to recognize honesty when it stood right in front of him? The afternoon crawled by with parent emails and budget spreadsheets, but his mind kept drifting. By the time the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Principal Warren had made a decision. He needed to learn more about Jamie Martinez. Standing in the main hallway as students streamed toward the exits, Principal Warren scanned the bustling crowd. Children shouted and laughed, backpacks bounced, and teachers called out reminders about tomorrow's assignments. The organized chaos of dismissal time was something he usually enjoyed from a distance. But today he was on a mission. He spotted Jamie near the water fountain, walking alone while other kids clustered in noisy groups around him. The boy moved with a purposeful stride, neither rushing nor dawdling, just steadily making his way toward the exit. Principal Warren fell into step beside him. "Hello again, Jamie," he said casually. Jamie looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Hello, Mr. Warren. Heading home?" Jamie nodded. "Yes, sir. Do you walk?" "Sometimes. Today I'm going to the community center. My mom picks me up there after work." Principal Warren nodded, keeping pace with the boy as they approached the doors. "The community center on Maple Street?" "That's quite a walk," Jamie shrugged. "It's not too bad, except when it rains." They pushed through the heavy doors into the autumn afternoon. The school grounds were alive with activity. Buses idling in the loop, parents waiting in cars, crossing guards taking their positions. "Mind if I walk with you for a bit?" Principal Warren asked. "I've been stuck in my office all day. Could use some fresh air." Jamie looked surprised but nodded. "Okay." They walked in silence for a few moments, leaving the immediate school grounds and turning onto the tree-lined sidewalk of the residential neighborhood. Principal Warren noticed that Jamie kept a steady pace, his worn backpack hanging from thin shoulders. "So," Principal Warren said finally, "Ms. Winters mentioned you were working on family heritage projects today." Jamie's face brightened slightly. "Yeah, we're making family trees that show where everyone comes from. Did you know Ms. Winters' grandfather came from Italy? She showed us pictures of the town." "I didn't know that," Principal Warren admitted. "What about your family tree?" Jamie's enthusiasm dimmed a little. "Mine's not as interesting. Just me and my mom, really. And my grandma, but she died last year." "I'm sorry to hear that," Principal Warren said genuinely. "Were you close?" Jamie nodded, kicking at a stone on the sidewalk. "She lived with us. She taught me Spanish and how to cook rice and beans the right way." A small smile crossed his face. "She said store-bought beans were an insult to our ancestors." Principal Warren chuckled. "Sounds like a woman with strong opinions." "The strongest," Jamie agreed, his smile widening momentarily before fading again. "Mom works a lot more now that Grandma's gone. She has 2 jobs." They crossed a street, waiting for a car to pass. Principal Warren found himself slowing his usual brisk stride to match Jamie's shorter legs. "That must be hard," he said carefully. Jamie shrugged again, that too grown-up gesture that didn't belong on a child's shoulders. "It's okay. We're doing fine." But something in his voice suggested otherwise. Principal Warren remembered Mrs. Lopez's comment. "He's a good kid. Quiet but always helpful." He wondered now if that quietness hid more than just a shy personality. "So what do you do at the community center?" Principal Warren asked as they turned another corner. "Homework mostly. They have an after-school program, and sometimes I help Ms. Nancy with the younger kids." "You help out. How so?" "Reading to them or helping them with their coloring." Some of the little kids don't speak much English yet. I can translate. Principal Warren raised his eyebrows, impressed. That's very responsible of you. Jamie didn't respond to the compliment, just adjusted his backpack straps. The little kids are fun. Better than being home alone. The words hung in the air between them, simple but heavy with meaning. Principal Warren felt something twist in his chest. How many other students at his school were going home to empty apartments? How many were shouldering adult responsibilities while he was busy suspecting them of making up excuses and wandering the halls? They walked another block in companionable silence. The residential streets were giving way to more commercial buildings. A corner grocery, a laundromat, a small bakery with Spanish signs in the window. Do you like art? Principal Warren asked, remembering how Jamie had been chosen to get supplies. This time, Jamie's face truly lit up. I love it. Ms. Winter says I have a good eye for color. I'm saving up for a real sketchbook, not just notebook paper. What do you like to draw? Buildings mostly, and sometimes people. Jamie hesitated, then added, I'm working on a comic book about a kid superhero. His power is that he can understand any language in the world. That sounds fascinating, Principal Warren said, genuinely interested. What kinds of adventures does he have? He helps people who get lost or confused because they can't understand the words around them. Like there's one story where he helps an old man who can't read the medicine instructions, and another where he helps a new kid at school who keeps getting in trouble because he doesn't understand the rules yet. Principal Warren felt something shift in his perception of Jamie Martinez. This wasn't just a quiet, helpful student. This was a child with depth, with imagination, with empathy beyond his years. You know, Principal Warren said slowly, that sounds like a superhero who's really making a difference in everyday ways. Jamie kicked at another stone. Yeah, well, sometimes the small stuff is important too. They were approaching the community center now, a brick building with colorful handprints painted around the door and a small playground to one side. A banner hung above the entrance. Oak Ridge Community Center, everyone belongs here, in English and Spanish. Principal Warren had driven past it hundreds of times but had never been inside. From the sidewalk he could see children playing on the swings while others sat at picnic tables, presumably doing homework. Well, this is where I leave you, Principal Warren said, stopping at the corner. Thanks for letting me walk with you, Jamie. Jamie nodded, shifting his backpack again. It's okay. You're not as scary outside of school. Principal Warren laughed, surprised by the candid assessment. Am I scary at school? Jamie considered this seriously. Not scary like a monster. More like scary like you're always looking for kids doing something wrong. The honest observation landed like a punch to the gut. Principal Warren managed to keep his smile in place, but inwardly he winced. Was that really how the students saw him? As someone just waiting to catch them in wrongdoing? That's something to think about, he said quietly. Jamie seemed to regret his words. I didn't mean— No, Principal Warren interrupted gently. It's good feedback. Sometimes adults need to hear how we come across to students. Jamie studied him for a moment, then nodded. Well, bye, Mr. Warren. Thanks for walking with me. You're welcome, Jamie. I enjoyed our talk. As the boy headed toward the community center entrance, Principal Warren called after him. Jamie, I'd like to see that comic book sometime if you're willing to share it. Jamie turned, a flicker of surprise crossing his face, followed by something that might have been the beginning of trust. Really? Maybe next week? A cautious smile spread across Jamie's face. Okay, I'll bring it. Principal Warren watched as Jamie disappeared into the community center, swallowed by the noisy crowd of children inside. Then he turned and began the walk back to school, where his car waited in the parking lot. His mind was buzzing with new information and unanswered questions. What had started as a simple desire to verify his suspicions about Jamie had turned into something much more complicated. The boy's situation, his absent mother working 2 jobs, his role helping younger children, his artistic talents going unrecognized. All of it painted a picture that Principal Warren hadn't been looking for but now couldn't unsee. The comment about being scary at school particularly stung. Was that his legacy after 23 years in education? To be the administrator students feared rather than trusted? The man looking for wrongdoing instead of seeking out the good? By the time Principal Warren reached his car in the now empty school parking lot, he had made another decision. His conversation with Jamie Martinez wasn't going to be just an interesting anecdote to share at the dinner table tonight. It was going to be the beginning of something new, a challenge not just to a child, but to himself and the school he led. He just didn't know yet how far that challenge would take them, both. The following Monday morning arrived with a steady autumn rain that drummed against the windows of Oak Ridge Elementary. Principal Warren stood in the main entrance hall, greeting students as they shook water from their jackets and stomped puddles from their shoes. It was something he rarely did. Usually he was in his office by this time, preparing for the day's meetings or handling the inevitable Monday morning crises. But today was different. Since his walk with Jamie Martinez the previous week, Principal Warren had been thinking about the boy's words. Scary, like you're always looking for kids doing something wrong. The comment had settled deep in his mind, prompting him to wonder how many positive interactions he actually had with students on a daily basis. So here he was, smiling and wishing good mornings to surprised children who were more accustomed to seeing him only when they were in trouble. Some responded with hesitant hellos, while others stared as if they'd spotted a tiger trying to act like a house cat. "Good morning, Lily. That's a great dinosaur on your backpack," he said to a first grader who beamed up at him. "It's a stegosaurus. It has 17 plates on its back," she informed him proudly before skipping away. He chuckled, making a mental note about the dinosaur fact. Who knew what random knowledge might come in handy for connecting with students? The morning rush was beginning to thin when he spotted Jamie entering, his dark hair plastered to his forehead from the rain. Unlike many of the other children, he had no raincoat or umbrella. His thin jacket was soaked through and his sneakers squelched with each step. "Good morning, Jamie," Principal Warren called out. Jamie looked up, surprise flashing across his face. "Good morning, Mr. Warren. That's quite a soaking you got out there," Principal Warren observed. Noting how the boy shivered slightly, Jamie shrugged, that too-adult gesture that seemed to say he'd weathered worse storms. "It wasn't raining when I left home." Principal Warren frowned slightly. "Do you have dry clothes in your gym bag, maybe?" Jamie shook his head. "It's okay. I'll dry off." But Principal Warren wasn't satisfied with that answer. "Wait here a moment," he said, then disappeared into the nurse's office nearby. He returned with a clean, dry sweatshirt bearing the school's logo. "The nurse keeps extras for emergencies. This looks about your size." Jamie hesitated, looking at the offered sweatshirt with uncertainty. "Go on," Principal Warren encouraged. "Being cold and wet all day is a good way to catch a cold. And I think Mrs. Lopez would rather not have sneezing interrupting her math lesson." This earned a small smile from Jamie, who finally accepted the sweatshirt. "Thanks, Mr. Warren. You're welcome. Oh, and Jamie, I'm still looking forward to seeing that comic book of yours sometime this week." Jamie's eyes widened slightly. "You remembered that?" "Of course. Why don't you stop by my office during lunch period on Wednesday? Bring your comic and I'll provide the lunch." The boy looked genuinely puzzled, as if an invitation from the principal was something he couldn't quite make sense of. "Am I in trouble?" The question, asked so innocently, struck Principal Warren like a physical blow. Is that what students thought? That the only reason to see the principal was if you were in trouble? "Not at all," he assured Jamie. "I'm just interested in your work." "But if you'd rather not—" "No, I can come," Jamie interrupted quickly. "Wednesday at lunch. Excellent. I'll see you then." As Jamie walked away clutching the dry sweatshirt to his chest, Principal Warren felt a strange mix of emotions. Satisfaction at taking a small step toward changing his relationship with students, but also a growing uneasiness about Jamie's situation. No raincoat in October? No change of clothes? These were small details, but they painted a concerning picture. The next 2 days passed in a blur of administrative tasks, but Wednesday arrived before he knew it. Principal Warren made sure to pick up an extra sandwich from the local deli on his way to work, turkey and cheese, which seemed like a safe bet for a fifth grader's taste. At 12:15, there was a hesitant knock on his office door. "Come in," Principal Warren called, clearing budget reports from his desk to make space. The door opened slowly to reveal Jamie, clutching a worn spiral notebook to his chest. He looked around the office cautiously, as if checking for traps. "Right on time," Principal Warren said warmly. "Please have a seat." Jamie sat on the edge of the visitor's chair, still holding his notebook tightly. "I hope turkey and cheese is okay," Principal Warren said, placing the wrapped sandwich on the desk in front of Jamie. And there's an apple and a cookie, too. Jamie's eyes widened at the spread. You really got lunch? I said I would, didn't I? Principal Warren smiled, unwrapping his own sandwich. It's nice to have company while eating. Usually I'm just staring at emails. Jamie carefully set his notebook down to unwrap his sandwich, and Principal Warren caught a glimpse of colorful drawings on the cover. The boy took a bite, chewing thoughtfully before speaking again. Thanks for the sweatshirt the other day. I brought it back clean. He reached into his backpack and pulled out the neatly folded school sweatshirt. You didn't need to wash it, Principal Warren said, touched by the gesture. My mom said we always returned things nicer than when we borrowed them, Jamie explained simply, taking another bite of his sandwich. They ate in companionable silence for a few moments before Principal Warren nodded toward the notebook. So is that your comic book? Jamie nodded, wiping his hands carefully on a napkin, before pushing the notebook across the desk. It's not finished yet, and it's not as good as real comics. Principal Warren opened the notebook and felt his eyebrows rise in genuine surprise. The pages were filled with carefully drawn panels, colored with what looked like regular school markers but used with remarkable skill. The main character, a boy superhero wearing glasses and a cape made from what appeared to be a bedsheet, was rendered with surprising detail for a child's drawing. Jamie, this is excellent work, he said, slowly turning the pages to take in the story. You drew all this yourself? Jamie nodded, a flush of pride coloring his cheeks despite his attempt to look casual. Ms. Winters lets me use her special markers sometimes during free period. Principal Warren continued reading, genuinely impressed by both the artwork and the storyline. The superhero, named Word Wizard, used his language powers to help various people in a city that looked suspiciously like their own town. In one story, Word Wizard helped an elderly woman who couldn't read her prescription bottles. In another, he translated for a lost child who couldn't tell the police officer where he lived because he only spoke another language. This is really creative. Jamie, Principal Warren said, closing the notebook after reaching the end of the completed pages. You have a real talent here. Jamie ducked his head, but not before Principal Warren caught his smile. Thanks. What gave you the idea for a superhero who translates languages? Jamie took a bite of his apple, considering the question. When my grandma got sick, the doctors gave her all these papers and medicine labels in English. But she could only read Spanish, so I had to translate everything. He shrugged. I thought it would be cool if someone could understand every language automatically. Principal Warren nodded, noting once again how Jamie's imagination was shaped by very real, very adult responsibilities. That would be a useful superpower. Yeah, and it's not boring like super strength, Jamie added, warming to the topic. Word Wizard can go anywhere and help anyone, not just fight bad guys. I think you're onto something there, Principal Warren agreed. Not all heroes need to punch their way through problems. Jamie's face lit up at the validation. That's what I told my friend Thomas. He said it wasn't a real superpower if you couldn't beat up bad guys, but I think understanding people is more important sometimes. Principal Warren handed the notebook back, struck by the wisdom in that statement. I think you're absolutely right, Jamie. Understanding people is one of the most important powers we can have. As Jamie carefully tucked the notebook back into his backpack, Principal Warren made a decision. Jamie, have you ever shown these to Ms. Winters, your art teacher? Jamie shook his head. Not really. We don't do comics in art class. Well, I think she'd be very impressed. In fact, Principal Warren tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the desk. Our school is planning to publish a newsletter next month. We usually include student artwork, but it's often just holiday drawings or paintings from art class. I think a comic strip would be a wonderful addition. Jamie's eyes widened. A real publication? With my comic? If you're interested, Principal Warren said. We could feature Word Wizard and his language powers. Maybe a short story that other students could read. That would be... Jamie seemed at a loss for words, an ironic predicament for the creator of Word Wizard. Really cool, he finished finally. I think so too. Principal Warren smiled. Why don't you work on a short story, just a page or two, and we can include it in the November issue. Ms. Winters could even help you with the final version. Jamie nodded eagerly, already looking lost in thought as he considered the possibilities. As their impromptu lunch came to an end, Principal Warren felt a sense of satisfaction unlike anything he'd experienced in years of administrative work. Here was something concrete and positive, a chance to nurture talent rather than just manage behavior. "Thank you for sharing your work with me, Jamie," he said as the boy stood to leave. "It's been the highlight of my week." Jamie looked up, studying Principal Warren's face as if searching for insincerity. Finding none, he smiled, a real, full smile that transformed his serious face. "Thanks for lunch, Mr. Warren, and for liking my comic." "Same time next week?" Principal Warren found himself asking. "I'd love to see what Word Wizard does next." Jamie nodded, his smile growing even wider. "Same time next week," he agreed, heading for the door with a newfound bounce in his step. As the door closed behind Jamie, Principal Warren leaned back in his chair, the budget reports forgotten. Something important had just happened in his office, something that had nothing to do with discipline or administrative duties. He had connected with a student on a human level, had seen potential and encouraged it. And in doing so, he realized, he had taken the first step toward becoming the kind of principal he had always meant to be. The weekly lunch meetings with Jamie quickly became a highlight in Principal Warren's schedule. What had started as a simple gesture to connect with one student had evolved into something both of them looked forward to. Each Wednesday, they would share sandwiches and talk about Jamie's latest adventures for Word Wizard, the language translating superhero. Over the past month, Principal Warren had learned a great deal about Jamie. How the boy woke up early to make his own breakfast, how he helped younger kids with their homework at the community center, and how he treasured the few art supplies his grandmother had given him before she passed away. Small details that painted the picture of a child carrying far more responsibility than most adults realized. But today's lunch meeting was special. The November school newsletter had just been printed, featuring a colorful half-page comic strip starring Word Wizard. Jamie was due any minute, and Principal Warren had made sure to get extra copies for him to keep. A knock at the door pulled Principal Warren from his thoughts. "Come in," he called, straightening the newsletters on his desk. The door opened to reveal Jamie, but the boy wasn't alone. Behind him stood a petite woman in a waitress uniform, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. The family resemblance was unmistakable. She had the same serious eyes as Jamie, though hers held a wariness that her son's lacked. "Mr. Warren, this is my mom," Jamie said proudly. "She got time off work to see the newsletter." Principal Warren rose quickly, extending his hand. "Mrs. Martinez, it's a pleasure to meet you. Please come in." "Ms. Martinez," she corrected gently, shaking his hand with a firm grip despite her small stature. "Jamie has talked about these lunch meetings a lot. I wanted to thank you personally." "No thanks necessary," Principal Warren assured her. "Jamie's comic is truly impressive. I'm just glad we could showcase his talent." Ms. Martinez smiled, though the expression held a hint of tiredness around the edges. "My son has always had a big imagination, but this is the first time his school has noticed." There was no accusation in her tone, just a simple statement of fact that nonetheless made Principal Warren wonder how many other talents went unnoticed in his school every day. "Please, sit down, both of you," he said, gesturing to the chairs. "Jamie, why don't you show your mother the newsletter?" Jamie eagerly grabbed one of the copies from the desk, holding it up for his mother to see. "Look, Mom." They put it right on page 3. Ms. Martinez took the newsletter, her expression softening as she studied the colorful comic strip. In the story, Word Wizard helped a new student who couldn't understand the cafeteria menu and was too shy to ask for help. The final panel showed the student smiling, finally able to enjoy lunch with new friends thanks to Word Wizard's translation powers. "This is wonderful. Jamie," she said, genuine pride warming her voice. "Your grandma would have loved this." Jamie beamed at the mention of his grandmother. "I used her markers to color it. Ms. Winters helped me make the final version look professional." "Ms. Winters?" Ms. Martinez looked questioningly at Principal Warren. "Our art teacher," he explained. "She was very impressed with Jamie's work and stayed after school several days to help him prepare it for publication." Ms. Martinez nodded slowly. "I see, Jamie didn't mention that part." "I wanted it to be a surprise," Jamie explained quickly. "Ms. Winters said I have real potential, Mom. She even gave me special paper that real comic artists use." Principal Warren watched the interaction with interest. There was clearly a close bond between mother and son. But he sensed Ms. Martinez's discomfort, perhaps at learning she had been unaware of these after-school sessions. "Your son has quite a gift," Principal Warren said gently. But beyond his artistic talent, I've been most impressed by the stories he creates. Word Wizard solves problems by helping people understand each other. That's a pretty profound concept for someone his age. Ms. Martinez smiled faintly. Jamie has always been my little translator. When my mother got sick, he became our family's bridge to the English-speaking world. Her expression grew serious. Sometimes I worry he's had to be the grown-up too often. Jamie squirmed in his seat. Mom, it's okay. I like helping. Ms. Martinez reached over to smooth her son's hair, a gesture so full of love it made Principal Warren's chest tighten with emotion. I know you do, mijo, but you should also have time to just be a kid. There was a moment of silence heavy with unspoken concerns. Principal Warren cleared his throat. That's actually something I wanted to discuss with you, Ms. Martinez. We're starting a new after-school arts program next semester. Students will get to explore different creative fields: visual arts, music, creative writing. It would be a perfect fit for Jamie's talents. Jamie's eyes lit up. Really? Like a real art class? Even better, Principal Warren said. Professional artists from the community will come in to teach workshops. And the best part is it's being funded by a grant, so there's no cost to families. The last part was directed at Ms. Martinez, whose expression showed both interest and hesitation. That sounds wonderful. But Jamie already spends afternoons at the community center while I work. I couldn't pick him up earlier. That's the beauty of it, Principal Warren explained. The program runs from 3:30 to 5:30 here at school, and then we have a bus that drops students at the community center afterward. Jamie wouldn't miss any of his regular activities, but he'd get 2 hours of specialized arts instruction twice a week. Ms. Martinez looked at her son, whose face was alight with hope. You'd really like that, wouldn't you? Jamie nodded eagerly. Please, Mom. I could make even better comics. She smiled, reaching over to take his hand. Then we'll make it work. Turning to Principal Warren, she added, Thank you for thinking of him. The program was actually inspired by Jamie, Principal Warren admitted. After seeing his work, I realized we needed to do more to nurture creative talents. Not every student excels at traditional academics or sports. Ms. Martinez studied him with newfound interest. That's surprisingly thoughtful. When Jamie first mentioned having lunch with the principal, I assumed he was in some kind of trouble. Principal Warren laughed. That seems to be the general assumption about visits to my office. I'm trying to change that perception. Well, you've certainly changed it for us, Ms. Martinez said warmly. Their conversation was interrupted by the lunch bell ringing, signaling the end of the period. I should let you get back to work, Ms. Martinez said, standing. My shift starts in an hour, but I wanted to see this newsletter with my own eyes. I'm glad you came, Principal Warren said sincerely, rising to shake her hand again. And Jamie, don't forget to take some extra copies for your family. Jamie carefully rolled up several newsletters, his face still glowing with pride. Thank you, Mr. Warren. See you next Wednesday? Definitely, Principal Warren confirmed. I want to hear what Word Wizard does next. As they headed toward the door, Ms. Martinez paused. Mr. Warren, Jamie mentioned you walked him to the community center while back. Principal Warren nodded. That's right. It was a nice chance to get to know him better. Well, if you're free this Sunday, we're having a small celebration for Jamie's birthday at our apartment. Nothing fancy, just cake and a few friends. But it would mean a lot to Jamie if you could come. Surprised and touched by the invitation, Principal Warren found himself nodding. I'd be honored, thank you. Jamie looked up at his mother with surprised delight, then back at Principal Warren. Really? You'll come to my party? Wouldn't miss it, Principal Warren assured him. After they left, Principal Warren sat back at his desk, the budget reports he'd been avoiding still waiting for his attention. But his mind was elsewhere, reflecting on the unexpected turns his life had taken. Since that day he'd caught Jamie outside the art room. What had begun as a simple interaction, a suspicious principal challenging a student he didn't trust, had somehow blossomed into something neither of them could have predicted. He'd set out to catch a child in a lie, but had instead discovered a truth about himself, that somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten to look for the good in his students before assuming the worst. The revelation was both humbling and liberating. In trying to help one student find his voice, Principal Warren had rediscovered his own purpose as an educator. The after-school arts program was just the beginning. Already he had plans for a peer translation club inspired by Word Wizard, and was reconsidering how the school could better support students from families where English wasn't the primary language. The afternoon sun slanted through his office window, illuminating the stack of newsletters on his desk. Principal Warren picked one up, smiling at Jamie's colorful comic strip. Word Wizard stood proudly in the final panel, his bedsheet cape flowing behind him, a speech bubble above his head reading, "Understanding others is the greatest superpower of all." Simple words from a child's imagination, but they held a wisdom that Principal Warren was only now beginning to fully appreciate. He pinned the newsletter to his bulletin board, making it the first thing he would see each morning when he entered his office, a reminder of the unexpected lesson he had learned from Jamie Martinez, and the even more unexpected friendship that had grown as a result. Sunday afternoon found Principal Warren standing outside a modest apartment building on the east side of town, a wrapped gift tucked under his arm. He checked the address on his phone one more time before climbing the stairs to the second floor. It felt strange to be visiting a student's home, something he rarely did in all his years as an educator. The lines between his professional and personal life had always been clearly drawn. Yet here he was, about to attend Jamie Martinez's birthday party, a wrapped sketchbook and professional-grade colored pencils in hand. He knocked on apartment 2B, hearing the immediate sound of excited voices inside. The door swung open to reveal Jamie, his face split into a wide grin. "Mr. Warren, you really came." The boy's delight was unmistakable. "I said I would, didn't I?" Principal Warren smiled, stepping inside as Jamie moved back to let him in. The small apartment was clean and homey, with family photos on the walls and the delicious smell of food filling the air. A colorful happy birthday banner hung across one wall, and a small group of people gathered in the living room turned to look at the newcomer with curious expressions. "Everyone, this is Principal Warren," Jamie announced proudly. "From my school." Ms. Martinez emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Robert, thank you for coming," she said, using his first name with a warmth that suggested they were simply friends rather than parent and principal. "Thanks for inviting me." "Elena," he replied, having learned her first name during their conversation in his office. He held out the gift. For the man of the hour. Jamie accepted the package with careful hands. "Can I open it now, Mom?" "Go ahead," she nodded, exchanging a smile with Principal Warren. Jamie unwrapped the package with deliberate movements as if savoring every moment. When he saw what was inside, his eyes widened. A real sketchbook, and professional pencils. He ran his fingers over the smooth cover of the hard-bound sketchbook, then opened the tin of colored pencils, marveling at the rainbow of colors inside. "These are the kind real artists use." "Well, you are a real artist," Principal Warren said simply. "Come meet everyone," Jamie said, carefully setting his new treasures on a small side table. He led Principal Warren to the living room, where he introduced him to a small elderly woman from next door, two of his friends from school with their mothers and his cousin Thomas, who lived across town. Despite being the only school official present, Principal Warren soon found himself feeling surprisingly comfortable. He accepted a plate of homemade tamales and rice from Elena, and joined the adults in conversation while the children played a board game on the floor. "Jamie tells me you've been having lunch with him every week," said Mrs. Diaz, the mother of one of Jamie's friends. Principal Warren nodded. "It started with his comic book. I was so impressed that I wanted to hear more about his stories." "It's made such a difference for him," Elena said quietly, sitting down beside them with her own plate. "Jamie has always been a good student, but quiet. He never thought anyone at school really saw him." "I'm afraid that was probably true," Principal Warren admitted. "Until recently, I was more focused on managing problems than spotting potential. Jamie changed that for me." "How so?" asked Mr. Reyes, Tomas's father, who had been listening from across the small coffee table. Principal Warren considered the question carefully. "I guess you could say he reminded me why I became an educator in the first place. It wasn't to enforce rules or maintain discipline. It was to help children discover their gifts and find their place in the world." Elena smiled. "That's a pretty powerful reminder from a 10-year-old. Now 11, Principal Warren corrected, nodding toward Jamie, who was laughing with his friends over the board game. The conversation shifted to other topics: the upcoming holidays, the cold weather, neighborhood news. Principal Warren found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did at school functions. Here he wasn't the principal, He was just Robert, a guest at a birthday party, enjoying good food and friendly conversation. After cake was served and presents were opened, Jamie's excitement over the new art supplies was matched only by his reaction to a set of Word Wizard t-shirts his mother had custom-made. For him and his friends, the children disappeared into Jamie's room to read comic books. The adults lingered over coffee, the conversation growing more personal. "It hasn't been easy since my mother passed," Elena confided. "She helped so much with Jamie while I worked. Without her..." "You're doing an amazing job," Principal Warren said sincerely. "Jamie is one of the most responsible, thoughtful students I've ever known. Sometimes too responsible," Elena sighed. "He tries to take care of everything. The cooking, the cleaning, translating bills for me. I worry he's missing out on just being a kid." Principal Warren nodded, understanding. "That's why the arts program is so important. It gives him a place to express himself, to play with ideas rather than just shouldering responsibilities." "It's more than that," Elena said. "These past few weeks, since you started taking an interest in his comics, I've seen a change in him. He's more confident, more willing to show his work to others. Before, he kept his drawings hidden away like they weren't worth sharing." Principal Warren felt a wave of emotion at her words. It was one thing to hope you were making a difference in a student's life, and another, to hear it confirmed by a parent. "I have a confession," he said after a moment. "The first time I met Jamie, really met him, not just as another student, I didn't believe him." Elena raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "He was returning keys to the art room, and I assumed he was wandering the halls without permission. I was ready to catch him in a lie." Principal Warren shook his head at the memory. "Instead, I discovered he was telling the perfect truth. It made me wonder how many other students I'd misjudged over the years." There was no reproach in Elena's expression, only thoughtful understanding. "We all make assumptions. The important thing is recognizing when they're wrong." From Jamie's bedroom came the sound of children's laughter, free, unburdened, joyful. The sound brought smiles to the adults' faces. "That right there," Mr. Reyes said, nodding toward the sound. "That's what matters. Kids being kids." "Exactly," Principal Warren agreed. "And finding ways to make that happen more often at school is my new mission." As the afternoon light began to fade, guests started to leave. Principal Warren helped Elena clear plates and fold up the card table they'd used for cake and ice cream. Jamie and his remaining friend were still in his room, now drawing with the new colored pencils. "Jamie, come say goodbye to Principal Warren," Elena called. Jamie appeared in the doorway, his hands stained with color, a new drawing clutched carefully in one hand. "You're leaving?" "I'm afraid so," Principal Warren said. "But thank you for including me in your birthday. I had a wonderful time." Jamie held out the drawing. "This is for you. I just finished it." Principal Warren accepted the paper and felt his breath catch. It was a drawing of two figures, one tall, one small, walking side by side down a colorful street. The smaller figure wore a cape with WW emblazoned on it, while the larger figure wore a tie and carried a briefcase. Both were smiling. "It's Word Wizard and his friend, Principal Wisdom," Jamie explained earnestly. "They're a team now. Word Wizard helps people understand different languages, and Principal Wisdom helps people see the good in everyone." For a moment, Principal Warren couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. The simple drawing captured something profound, not just a friendship between a principal and student, but a transformation of how he viewed his own role as an educator. "This is the best gift I've ever received," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you, Jamie." The boy beamed, then surprised Principal Warren by stepping forward to give him a quick hug before darting back to his room. Slightly embarrassed by his own display of affection, Elena walked Principal Warren to the door. "You've changed his life, you know," she said quietly. "Not many people take the time to really see a quiet child like Jamie." Principal Warren shook his head. "It's the other way around, Elena. Jamie changed my life. He reminded me what it means to truly be a principal, not just managing a school, but seeing the potential in every student." He carefully tucked the drawing into his jacket. "I'm going to frame this and hang it in my office. Whenever I start to forget, it will remind me." "You're always welcome in our home," Elena said, surprising him with a warm hug. "Not as the principal, but as our friend Robert." As Principal Warren drove home through the darkening evening, his mind was already racing with new ideas for school programs, ways to connect with students beyond discipline and academics. The drawing lay carefully on the passenger seat beside him. Word Wizard and Principal Wisdom side by side. A chance encounter in a hallway. A distrustful principal challenging a child, and seconds later, the beginning of a journey neither could have anticipated. It wasn't just about believing what he heard from Jamie that day. It was about learning to listen differently to all his students, to hear the truth of their lives and dreams. Principal Wisdom indeed. It was a name to live up to, a reminder that true wisdom begins with trust, understanding, and the courage to see beyond first impressions. And thanks to an 11-year-old boy with a comic book and a powerful imagination, Principal Robert Warren was finally learning this most important lesson of all.